My name is Eli Mercer. I'm a family law attorney based in Denver, Colorado. I help people, mostly women and kids, get out of dangerous relationships. I spend most days reviewing court filings, arguing for restraining orders, and building cases to protect victims who feel invisible. But nothing prepared me for what I saw one Monday morning. The name on the protective order was Beth Mercer. The woman requesting help had bruises on her neck and claimed her husband had threatened to kill her. But it wasn't her name that stopped me. It was the name of the respondent, Cliff Mercer. My father, the same man who dragged me out of our house in the middle of a rainstorm 6 years ago, the day after my mother's funeral. The same man who called me worthless because I dared to question why his new girlfriend was moving in before Mom's body was cold. The same man who smiled, actually smiled, at her funeral. And now, that man was being accused of abuse. Again. I stared at the file longer than I should have. My hand was frozen over the manila folder. My eyes locked on the case number like it would change if I blinked. Beth Mercer, his wife now, apparently, was filing for divorce and an emergency protection order. She was scared for her life. And here I was, the attorney assigned to her case. I hadn't seen that name, Cliff Mercer, in 6 years. I hadn't said it out loud since the night he slammed the door in my face, told me to go figure out life without Mommy, and left me standing in the cold. But the memories didn't wait for permission. They came in waves. The sharp smell of whiskey every night after work. The sound of plates breaking against the kitchen wall. My mother's eyes, tired, glassy, but always trying to smile for my little sister and me. And then, her body, broken at the bottom of the stairs. They said she slipped. My father said she slipped. I never believed that. Now, here was Beth, his so-called upgrade, begging for legal protection from the man she chose over my mother. I should have closed the folder. I should have walked away. But I didn't. I took the file to my supervisor. "Peterson," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want me to handle this one?" He looked up, surprised. "You okay, Eli? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just, the case is heavy." He paused. "It is. You sure you're up for it?" I nodded. But deep down, I wasn't doing this for Beth. I was doing it for my mom. For Casey, my little sister, who still cried in her sleep the last night I saw her. And for the 16-year-old version of me who stood in the rain, fists clenched, heart shattered, with nowhere to go, and no one left to fight for him. Now, I had the law. And this time, he would be the one afraid. I remember the silence more than anything else, not the kind that brings peace. No, the kind that fills a room like smoke. The kind that makes your lungs tight and your skin itch. My mother's funeral was held in a small chapel just outside our town. The pews were filled with faces I barely knew. Neighbors, co-workers, church people who smiled like they cared, but didn't look me in the eye. No one asked why a healthy woman in her 40s suddenly fell down the stairs. No one asked why her arms had bruises. They just nodded politely, murmured the usual things. She was so kind, such a good mother. Then avoided the front row where I sat holding my little sister Casey's hand. She was 7. Her face was blank. I was 16, and I felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just numbness, like someone had unplugged me. Dad sat 2 seats away from me, hands folded, wearing the same wrinkled gray suit he wore to every job interview he never got. He looked bored, tired, not devastated, not like a man who'd just lost his wife of nearly 20 years. And then I noticed something else. He kept checking his phone. Not once, not twice, repeatedly, like he was waiting for a message more important than his wife's burial. I clenched my fists. My knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream across the chapel. "What are you looking at? What the hell is so important?" But I didn't, because Casey's hand tightened around mine. Her breathing was shaky. I could feel her fighting not to cry. So I stayed quiet, like I always did. The pastor spoke about God's will and healing in time, but none of it made sense. There was no comfort in it, just more words, more smoke. After the service, people lined up to offer their condolences. I stood beside the casket, mechanical, nodding, accepting handshakes, avoiding eye contact with my father. He, on the other hand, had already lit a cigarette before we even left the cemetery. He stood next to his truck, talking to a woman in dark sunglasses. She laughed. Actually laughed. Her voice cut through the air like a knife. I knew that laugh. It was Beth. She used to work the bar my dad drank at. I remembered her hand brushing his shoulder once, when I was maybe 12. I remembered the look Mom gave him that night, how she stayed quiet during dinner and scrubbed the sink until her hands were raw. Now Beth was here, at the funeral, wearing perfume strong enough to choke, and my father was smiling. That's when something snapped. I walked up to him, still in my black dress shirt, still holding Casey's hand, and I asked, loud enough for anyone to hear, "What's she doing here?" My father's smile faded. "She's a friend," he said, his voice flat. "A friend?" I shot back. "She wasn't Mom's friend." He stared at me. Then he said it. "Your mom's gone, Eli. Don't make things worse." Worse? I didn't respond. I just looked at Beth. She didn't flinch. She didn't look ashamed. And that's when I realized, whatever I thought this family was, it ended with my mother. That night, we returned to the house, the same house where she died. Her pictures were still on the wall, but something in the air had shifted. The next morning, Beth was in the kitchen making coffee, in Mom's robe. 2 days. It had only been 2 days. 2 days. It took him 2 days to replace my mother. I came downstairs early that morning, hoping it was all just a bad dream, but there she was. Beth, standing at the stove, wearing Mom's robe, pouring coffee like she owned the place. The kitchen smelled different, not like cinnamon or warm toast the way it used to when Mom was alive. Now it reeked of cheap perfume and burnt eggs. Beth turned and smiled at me, like this was normal. "Morning, Eli," she said, chipper. "Want some breakfast?" I stood there, silent. My fists clenched at my sides, my jaw tight. "Where's Casey?" I asked, my voice flat. Beth shrugged. "Still sleeping, I think. Poor girl's been through so much. We all have." I looked at the mug in her hand. It was Mom's favorite chipped on the side, with a faded red heart on it. Beth was drinking from it like it meant nothing. My father walked in, yawning like it was any other day. "Eli," he grunted. "You got school today?" I didn't answer. He sat down at the table, opened the paper, and started reading. That was it. That was my breaking point. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice louder than I intended. He looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" "She's in Mom's robe, drinking from her cup, in this house, 2 days after the funeral." Beth shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say a word. I kept going. I couldn't stop. "You couldn't even wait a week. She's not even buried properly, and you're playing house?" My father stood up. He was a tall man, built like a mechanic, broad shoulders, rough hands, the kind of man who never needed to raise his voice to scare you. But this time, he did. "Watch your mouth," he growled. I didn't flinch. "No, you watch yours. She's not my mother. She doesn't belong here." He stepped forward. Don't you dare talk to me like that. She doesn't belong here, I shouted again. This was Mom's house. This was our home. His hand moved faster than I could process. A sharp crack across my cheek. My head whipped sideways. Everything went quiet for a second. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, his voice cold, deliberate. If you don't like it, Eli Mercer, you can get the hell out. I blinked. My face stung. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from disbelief. You're serious, I whispered. He pointed at the door. Beth stood frozen. She didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. I turned and walked upstairs, packed a small bag, my school backpack, a change of clothes, my mother's journal tucked in the bottom. I didn't even take a jacket. When I walked back down, my father was at the table again, reading, like none of it had happened. I looked at Beth. She glanced away. Then I stepped outside. It had started raining. The kind of rain that soaks you instantly out, sharp, merciless. I stood on the porch for a moment, waiting, hoping someone, anyone, would stop me. No one did. So I walked. 16 years old. Nowhere to go. No plan. No money. Just the echo of my father's voice behind me. Get the hell out. And the sound of the rain, pounding against the street like it was trying to wash everything away. I didn't have a destination, just one name. Diane, my mom's younger sister, the one who used to visit on birthdays until she stopped showing up. I remember Mom saying they had differences, but she never explained what that meant. I hadn't seen Diane in years, but I knew where she lived. A small yellow house on the edge of town, past the old gas station and across from the train tracks. I remembered because it was the last place I ever felt safe outside my own home. By the time I got there, the rain had soaked through my clothes, my sneakers squished with every step. My fingers were so cold I could barely form a fist to knock. I hesitated. What if she didn't want to see me? What if she opened the door and saw Cliff's son instead of her sister's boy? But I had no other choice. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times, harder than I meant to. A porch light flicked on, curtains shifted, then the door creaked open. She looked older. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray, but her eyes were the same sharp, cautious, soft around the edges. She looked at me and for a second didn't say anything. Then she whispered, "Eli." I nodded. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. She stepped aside. "Come in." I walked inside, dripping water all over her floor. I stood there, shivering, not knowing what to say. Then she noticed the bag on my back. I slowly unzipped it, pulled out the wooden box wrapped in my hoodie, and placed it gently on her kitchen table. She looked at it, recognition flashing in her eyes like lightning. "You kept it," she said. I didn't know she knew about the box, but she did. Everyone who loved my mother knew about that box. It was about the size of a shoebox. Dark mahogany, hand-carved. It used to sit on the top shelf of Mom's closet. Off limits. Or so I thought. She ran her fingers over the lid, but didn't open it. Instead, she looked at me. "Did he hit you?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She pulled a towel from the drawer and handed it to me. "Bathroom's down the hall. Dry off. I'll make tea." I nodded again, my throat still too tight to speak. That night, she gave me a warm meal, dry clothes, and a couch with a heavy blanket. But more than anything, she gave me a sentence I hadn't heard in a long time. "You're safe now, Eli. You're not alone." And for the first time since my mother died, I believed it. I waited until the house was quiet. Diane had gone to bed. The lights were off. The heater hummed softly in the hallway. I sat alone in her living room, the wooden box on my lap, my fingers resting on the lid. I had never opened it before, not even when I was younger and curious. Mom kept it high on a shelf, wrapped in an old scarf, tucked behind sweaters. I always thought it held jewelry or family documents. Turns out, it held the truth. I opened the lid slowly. Inside, a small leather-bound notebook sat on top of a stack of folded letters and faded photos. The journal's cover was cracked, the edges frayed. I ran my thumb along the spine before I opened to the first page. Her handwriting was neat, soft, the way she used to speak when she was trying not to cry. March 3rd. He came home drunk again. I tried not to speak. He hates when I speak. I kept reading, entry after entry, month after month, quiet suffering written in ink. Casey had a fever. I asked him to go get medicine. He threw my purse across the room and told me to figure it out myself. I told myself I could take it, for the kids. But today he hit Eli, just once, but it shook me. I stopped there. The words blurred. My hands trembled. I had forgotten that night. Maybe I forced myself to. But now it came back, his hand across my back, my mother's voice cracking, the kitchen floor cold against my knees. I kept reading. I think he wants me gone. I found Beth's number in his jacket pocket. I confronted him. He laughed. He said I was paranoid, that I should be grateful he comes home at all. Every word was a wound she couldn't say out loud. And then I reached it. The line that would repeat again and again, like a soft whisper trying to disappear. Some mornings, I wake up and wonder if this will be the day I won't wake up again. And I wonder if anyone will ask why. I shut the journal. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a diary. It was a record, a breadcrumb trail, proof that she was slowly disappearing long before she died. And we all missed it. I leaned back on the couch, the journal pressed to my chest, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about the bruises she covered with sweaters in July, the way she'd freeze when a door slammed, the way she smiled too much in front of Casey, the way she looked at me like she wanted to say something, but never did. I finally understood. She hadn't slipped. She had been silenced, and maybe no one had asked why. But I would. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks beside you in silence. It sharpens your senses but numbs your voice. You see everything more clearly, but say less and less. That was me. After I moved in with Diane, she enrolled me at a public school on the other side of town. New district, new uniform, new hallway sounds. It was supposed to be a fresh start. But I didn't feel new. I felt like a house after a fire still standing, but hollow inside. I kept to myself. No clubs, no lunch tables, no forced conversations. I'd sit in the back row and take notes, listen closely, observe. And I listened well. I watched how people moved when they thought no one was watching. The way a teacher's smile faded when they turned to the whiteboard. The way a girl flinched when a boy raised his hand too fast. The way a boy laughed too loud to cover the quiet between him and the world. Everyone carried something, but most people didn't know how to read it. I did, because I had lived it. People thought I was cold. Maybe I was, but it wasn't anger. It was focus. I poured every ounce of energy into my grades, not because I liked school, but because knowledge gave me control. And for the first time in a long time, I needed to feel in control. I'd come home, finish my assignments, and read my mother's journal. 1 page a night. I made it a rule. 1 page. No more, no less. Some entries made me angry. Some made me feel like I couldn't breathe. but all of them made me remember that I couldn't waste time. Diane tried to talk to me sometimes over dinner or during commercials, but I kept it surface level. How's school? Fine. Need anything? No. She didn't push, but one night she said something that stuck. You don't have to tell me what's hurting, Eli, she said, her voice quiet. But don't pretend nothing is. I didn't answer, but I thought about that line for days. There's a moment after trauma when your body keeps moving, but your soul lags behind. That's where I was, a ghost in my own life. But with each passing week, I started to feel something return. It wasn't joy, it wasn't peace, it was purpose. A small voice inside me that whispered, keep going. She didn't survive for you to waste this. So I woke up earlier, studied harder. I researched law-watched court hearings online, borrowed books from the local library, and started highlighting every passage that talked about justice, family, power. That was the word that stuck out the most. Power. My father had it. The system let him keep it. And my mother lost everything because she had none. I couldn't change what happened to her, but I could make sure I never ended up like her. Not in silence, not in fear, not in someone else's control. I didn't wake up one day and decide to become a lawyer. It wasn't some childhood dream. I never played dress-up in suits or imagined courtrooms. My heroes weren't on TV. They were women who stayed and still tried. Boys who hid bruises and went to school anyway. I decided to study law because my mother died without anyone fighting for her. She lived in silence, and when she died, no one asked why. No detective, no autopsy request. Just a quick funeral, followed by my father returning home like he'd simply lost a pet. I remember sitting in Diane's kitchen, weeks after moving in, reading a case summary online. A woman had filed for divorce, then dropped it. 3 months later, she was dead. The husband walked. Lack of evidence. I clicked through 3 more stories like that. Different names, same ending. And all I could think was, what if someone had believed them? What if someone had just listened? That's when it clicked. I didn't want revenge. I wanted language. The language that would make people like my father answer for what they did. The language that turned pain into facts, bruises into reports, screams into testimony. So I decided. That was it. Law school. Diane supported me quietly. She saw the change in me. I wasn't just studying, I was chasing something. She'd leave brochures on the table. She made calls to colleges on my behalf. But the money? That was the hard part. We didn't have much. I worked weekends stocking shelves at a grocery store. Some nights I'd read tort law summaries in the stockroom, my apron still on. But I needed more. I needed help. So I started writing scholarship applications. The first one took 3 hours. Then 4 more. Then 10. Each one asked for the same thing. Tell us your story. I hated that part. I didn't want to write about the rain, the slap, the door slamming behind me, or how I stood in soaked clothes and swore I'd never forgive the man who used to call himself my father. But I knew that was the price, so I sat down at the same kitchen table where Diane once poured tea and whispered, "You're safe now." And I told the truth. My name is Eli Mercer. When I was 16, my mother died from injuries that were dismissed as an accident. I believe she was silenced by years of abuse that no one noticed or chose not to. I wasn't strong enough then to protect her, but I intend to be strong enough now to protect others like her. I wrote that sentence 5 times before I stopped shaking. Then I printed it, signed it, and mailed it. 2 weeks later, I got my first call. A small local college, pre-law track, partial scholarship, enough to get started. I thanked them, hung up. Then I sat in the dark and cried, not because I was happy, but because finally, I wasn't powerless anymore. And I whispered to the air, as if she could hear me, "Mom, I'm going to make sure your story doesn't end with silence." Every evening after work, Robert would head to the garage, not to fix things, but to hit things. He had a heavy bag hanging from a steel beam, duct-taped at the seams from years of punishment. I used to hear the thud, thud, thud through the walls at night. Steady, rhythmic, controlled. One evening, he caught me watching. "You ever throw a proper punch?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. I shrugged. "Not really." He pointed to the gloves hanging near the wall. "Then it's time." Didn't argue. I was 16, angry, and looking for somewhere to put it. He wrapped my wrists, showed me how to keep my chin down, elbows in, how to pivot, breathe, strike. The first time I hit the bag, it barely moved. The second time, I overcompensated and stumbled back. He didn't laugh. "Power comes from balance," he said, "not rage." That stuck with me. We trained twice a week. No yelling, no lectures, just gloves, breath, and sweat. At first, I thought it was about control, learning to hit back after years of flinching. But over time, I realized it was something else. It was about stillness, because when you're swinging wild, your head is chaos. But when you focus, when your hands and mind are aligned, everything else fades. I wasn't just learning to fight. I was learning to think while standing in fire. One night, after a long session, Robert sat on the bench and looked at me. "You think this will make you strong?" he asked. I nodded. He shook his head slowly. "No, this'll make you fast, sharp. But strong?" He tapped his temple. "That's in here." He picked up a book from the workbench and tossed it to me. It was about legal argument structure, the anatomy of persuasion. "Boxing teaches discipline," he said. "But law is how you win without ever throwing a punch." That night, I sat on my bed reading that book until my eyes burned, and I finally understood. My father had never won because he was stronger. He won because no one knew how to stop him, because he spoke louder, because he twisted words, because he made sure the story never left the walls of our house. But I could change that. I could learn the language he feared. I kept boxing, not to hurt, not to fight, but to stay calm. When I saw red, I'd go 10 rounds with the bag. When I felt helpless, I'd shadow box in the mirror until my breath steadied. And when I closed my eyes, I didn't imagine hitting my father anymore. I imagined standing in a courtroom, evidence in hand, and watching a man like him get sentenced. No yelling, no chaos, just truth delivered with precision. It came folded in thirds, pressed flat between the pages of a library book I didn't check out. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but then I saw the handwriting. Round, careful, a little shaky. It was hers. Casey, my little sister. There was no return address, no signature, just 3 short lines written in pencil, barely legible. An konyo kom, vanzuke hop me lam, ngi unsequelai. I froze. The world blurred. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Tatua. Tommy must have sent it. My old friend from school, the one person who knew where I'd gone, the one I trusted to keep eyes on her when I couldn't. I'd given him one job. If Casey ever asks about me, tell her I'm okay. But I never imagined she'd write me, let alone send me something so small and so heavy. I held the paper like it might dissolve. The corners were worn, like she'd folded and unfolded it too many times. I could imagine her sitting on the floor of that house, scribbling quickly, then hiding it when footsteps came down the hallway. I pressed the letter flat on my desk, reading it again. An konyoem come. 3 words that crushed me more than any punch I'd ever taken. How could she think I'd forget? I remembered the night I left like it happened yesterday. The rain, the slammed door, the way she screamed my name from behind the curtain. How I swore I'd come back. But weeks turned to months, then years. I told myself I needed time, that I had to build something before I could protect her. But now, seeing her words in front of me, I wondered, had I waited too long? Had she stopped believing? I didn't write back, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry. I miss you. Wait a little longer? It all felt like too little, too late. So instead, I folded the letter again, taped it inside the back cover of my notebook, next to my class schedule and study plan. Every morning, before heading out, I'd open that notebook and see her handwriting. It became my fuel. When lectures felt pointless, I saw her note. When I questioned if I could really make it through law school, I heard her voice. Emngi an sequelae. It wasn't a question, it was faith, and I refused to let it be wasted. Some people are driven by ambition, some by guilt. I was driven by a promise I couldn't break, not to myself, to her. I would go back, and when I did, I wouldn't go back empty-handed. I'd go back with knowledge, with power, with something stronger than fists or fear. I'd go back as someone who could finally fight back without losing control. I've handled dozens of family court cases. I've seen everything from jealous exes, fabricating threats, to real victims, too afraid to speak above a whisper. But nothing prepared me for the file that landed on my desk that Tuesday morning. Peterson dropped it beside my keyboard, like it was just another stack of paperwork. Emergency protection order. She's scared for her life, he said, sipping coffee. Husband's name is Cliff Mercer. My heart stopped. Peterson didn't notice. And the wife? I asked, already dreading the answer. He flipped a few pages. Beth Mercer. I froze. Beth. Her. The woman who wore my mother's robe 3 days after she died. The woman who called me ungrateful when I asked why she was living in our house. The woman who stood silent the night my father slapped me and threw me out into the rain. Now she was the victim? It didn't make sense. I opened the file slowly. Photos, a bruised arm, a medical report, a handwritten affidavit, shaky, barely legible, detailing how Cliff had started hitting her, threatening her life if she tried to leave. The same pattern, the same language my mother never got to write down, except Beth had. The irony tasted bitter. I stared at the report for a long time. Part of me felt satisfied, like some twisted justice had come full circle. Beth thought she was untouchable when she took Mom's place. Now she was begging for help from the son she helped destroy. And yet, I couldn't ignore the bruises. They were real. The fear in her handwriting was real. The pattern was real. I knew it by heart. So I sat there, caught between 2 instincts. One said, "She deserves what she's getting." The other whispered, No one deserves this. Not even her. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling, trying to breathe through the storm rising in my chest. This wasn't just a case. It was my past walking through the door, asking for help with tears instead of threats. I could have handed it off. No one would blame me. Conflict of interest. Too personal. Too close. But I knew better. No one else in that office would understand what Beth was going through. Like I did, just because I read the file, but because I had lived it. I knew how Cliff operated. How he broke you down with silence, then shame, then rage. How he made you believe escape was betrayal. How he could turn anyone into a version of themselves they didn't recognize, even Beth. I opened her affidavit again. He told me if I left, he'd make sure no one believed me. Just like before. Just like before. That line hit me harder than I expected. Before? Before me? Before Mom? How long had this been going on? I stood up, grabbed the file, and walked into Peterson's office. "I'll take it," I said. He looked up, surprised. "You sure? You look pale." "I'm sure." And I was. Not for Beth. Not even for myself. But for every woman who ran out of time before someone believed her. We scheduled the meeting for 9 a.m. Standard intake. Nothing special. A woman requesting emergency protection sits down with her attorney. We go over the case, build the timeline, prep for court. It was supposed to be routine. But this wasn't routine. This was Beth. I stood in the corner of the meeting room, pacing. My chest was tight, jaw clenched so hard it started to ache. I didn't know what she'd say. I didn't even know what I wanted her to say. I just knew the moment was coming, and I wasn't ready for it. The door opened. She stepped in slowly, clutching her purse like it might fall apart. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, face pale, lips chapped. She looked thinner than I remembered, smaller even, like a version of herself had been chipped away piece by piece. But it was her. She sat down without noticing me at first, eyes down, shoulders curled inward. "Beth Mercer?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She looked up, her eyes locked on mine. There was a pause, maybe 2, maybe 10 seconds, where the room felt suspended in time. Then she whispered it, barely louder than breath. "Eli?" I didn't answer, just pulled out my notepad and sat across from her. She blinked quickly, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "I didn't know you were... I heard you left." "I did," I said. "Let's talk about why you're here." She nodded slowly. I watched her gather herself, like someone recovering from a fall. Still dazed, still trying to pretend it didn't hurt. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded paper, and handed it to me. It was her timeline, written in uneven lines. Dates, incidents, threats, proof. I didn't say a word, just started reading. While I read, she spoke. At first, her voice trembled. Then it cracked. Then it steadied. "He started drinking more last year. I think after Casey left for school. I was alone more. He hated when I left the house, said I was embarrassing him." She paused. "There were good days. I know that sounds stupid, but there were. He could be gentle, sometimes, and I held on to those." I kept taking notes, never looking up. But inside, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not hatred, not revenge, just recognition. She wasn't the same woman who mocked my mother. She wasn't the same woman who let my father hit me and said nothing. That version of her was gone. What sat in front of me now was a ghost in her own body, just like my mother had been, before the end. When she finished talking, the room went quiet again. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "Why are you helping me?" I finally looked up. "Because someone should have helped her," I said. She knew who I meant, and for once Beth didn't speak. She just nodded and cried. We sat in silence for a long time after she cried. Beth didn't sob the way some people do when they break down. No drama, no noise, just quiet tears, one by one, sliding down her cheeks like she was trying not to admit they were there. She wiped them quickly, then apologized like emotion was something to be ashamed of. I stayed quiet, not out of sympathy, out of memory, because even as I looked at the woman in front of me, bruised, broken, begging for safety, my mind took me somewhere else, to a kitchen, a chipped cereal bowl, a glass of spilled milk, and Casey, 7 years old, standing on a stool trying to pour it herself. She dropped the box. Milk splashed everywhere. Beth, back then, full of perfume and pride, snapped. "You stupid girl!" She slapped Casey across the arm, hard. Casey cried, and I remember standing there, fists clenched, 16 years old, shaking with rage. I yelled, and Beth turned on me. But my father was the one who stepped in. And that night, I got the backhand. Beth watched, didn't say a word, didn't blink. And now, here she was, asking for my protection, my help, my time, my skill. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me screamed, "She doesn't deserve this. Let her rot. Let her feel what we felt." But another part, the part that remembered my mother's tired eyes, that part whispered something else. No one deserves this, not even her. So I closed the file in front of me and said what I'd been holding back. "I'm not doing this for you." Beth looked up, startled. "I'm doing this for her," I continued, "for my mother. For every night she sat in that house wondering how she ended up with a man like him." Beth opened her mouth to speak, maybe to defend herself, maybe to apologize. But I stopped her. "I don't need you to explain. I just need you to tell the truth. All of it. No edits. No shame." She nodded slowly, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not arrogance, not defensiveness, just regret. "Casey," she whispered. "She was a sweet girl." I stared at her. "You hit her," I said, flatly. She closed her eyes. "I know." Silence. "I hated myself after that," she added. "But I was trying so hard to be what he wanted. I thought if I kept him calm, I'd be safe. I didn't realize I was becoming like him." That line hit me harder than I expected, because I remembered the day I almost hit someone who startled me from behind. Just a reflex. But the look on their face, it mirrored the same fear I used to have. And I realized then how easy it is to carry the violence with you, even when you leave. Beth didn't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't have given it, but in that moment we understood each other. Not as enemies, not as family, but as two people trying to survive the same storm, in different lifeboats, on the same sinking ship. Beth didn't talk right away. She sat still, hands clasped like she was praying, or bracing for something worse. "I used to think I was different," she finally said. "Smarter than the other women. Untouchable." I didn't interrupt, just listened. She needed to say it her way. "When I met Cliff," Beth continued, "he was charming, polished. He made me feel chosen, like I was finally stepping into the life I deserved. She smiled for a second. Then it vanished. But it was all performance. I didn't see the strings until they were around my neck. She looked past me toward the wall, maybe seeing something I couldn't. 3 months in, he started deciding what I wore. Not obviously at first, just little comments. "That skirt's too tight for a woman your age. Why don't you wear something softer, like Ellen did?" And I wanted to please him. I laughed it off, changed quietly. She swallowed hard. Then he took my phone, said I was addicted to it, said it made me anxious. He bought me a house phone instead, said it was healthier, said he was helping. I knew this pattern. Isolation disguised as concern. Power wrapped in the silk of protection. Beth reached into her coat and pulled out something small. A key. Old, rusted, slightly bent. He locked me in the house for 2 days once, just because I went out to buy a birthday card for my sister and didn't tell him. She looked at the key. I was gone 30 minutes. When I came back, he was waiting. Calm. Too calm. He said, "You didn't ask. You disrespected the order of this house." Then he closed the door and turned the bolt. My stomach clenched. I remembered that lock. Thick, heavy, always loud. I remember hearing it at night, after he thought we were all asleep. Beth leaned in slightly. On the second day, I begged him. I told him I was sorry, that I'd never do it again. He smiled, said he was glad I was learning. She looked at me now. "I became a shell in that house, Eli. You think I didn't see what I became around you and Casey? I saw it. I hated it. But I was too deep in to claw my way out." She paused, looked ashamed. I told myself I wasn't like Ellen. I wasn't weak. But the truth is, I wasn't strong. Silence filled the room. Not heavy, not awkward, just real. I sat back, eyes on her, not judging, not forgiving either, but understanding, in a quiet, uncomfortable way. Beth held the key one more time, then set it gently on the table. "You asked for the truth," she said. "There it is." I nodded once. "That's enough for now." And it was, for now. I knew I couldn't do this alone. Cliff Mercer wasn't just my father. He was a master manipulator, someone who smiled for the world while bruising it behind closed doors. If I wanted to reopen my mother's case, I needed someone who understood how truth gets buried, someone who knew the difference between lack of evidence and someone made sure nothing could be found. That someone was Daniel Reyes, former investigator, retired technically, pushed out really, after exposing misconduct in a case that involved the mayor's nephew. Since then, he'd worked solo, quiet, off the radar, only took cases he believed in. I was hoping this would be one of them. His office was above a print shop. No sign, just an old glass door with half-faded lettering. Reyes Investigations. I knocked twice. "Come in," a voice called gruff, tired. He looked up as I entered. Reading glasses low on his nose, legal pad full of scribbles. Gray stubble, denim shirt. No nonsense. "You're Eli Mercer?" he asked. "Yes. You said in your email, you want me to look into your mother's death. Ellen Mercer. The fall." "That's right." He leaned back in his chair. "That case was ruled accidental. No police inquiry, no charges, nothing suspicious on record." I sat down. "No one questioned it," I said, "because my father made sure of that." Daniel studied me. "You want to dig up a closed case? Reopen a file nobody wants to touch?" "No," I said quietly. I want to give her the justice she never got. I want the truth on record, and I want him exposed for what he really is. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Who else knows you're doing this? My aunt, Diane, and, I hesitated, Beth, his current wife. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Beth Mercer? She goes by Jameson now. She's filing for a protective order. She's finally leaving him. He gave a low whistle. So the mistress became the victim. That's poetic, if nothing else. I'm not here for poetry, I said. I'm here to bring him down legally, permanently. Daniel tapped a pen on the desk. All right, Eli. If I do this, I'm going to need everything: autopsy reports, hospital files, witness statements, if any still exist, and I'll need access to your mother's journals. You mentioned those? I nodded and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside were scanned copies of selected entries. Nothing too personal, just enough to show the pattern. The fear, the escalation. He flipped through a few pages in silence. Then he stopped at a line. Some mornings, I wake up and wonder if this will be the day I don't. He closed the file. You're right, he said. This was never an accident. Cool. He stood up, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a fresh case folder. This is going to take time. People will try to block it. Police records may have been lost. Evidence might be gone. But there are always cracks. I stood up too. You think you can find something? Daniel grinned faintly. I once found a murderer from a drop of blood on shoelaces. Cliff Mercer won't be the first man who thought he was untouchable. As I walked out of his office, the weight on my chest didn't feel lighter, but it finally had direction. The reckoning had begun. There was a time I thought the past was just dust, something you sweep away, clean up, forget. Something too heavy to carry, too old to fix. But I was wrong. The past isn't dust. It lingers. It hides in corners. And if you're brave or stubborn enough to go looking, you can still find its fingerprints. That's what I did. Daniel gave me access to a few documents, scanned reports, public records, taped statements from the original case. Most of it was thin, deliberately vague. The official incident report was 3 paragraphs long. Mrs. Mercer was found unresponsive at the base of the staircase by her husband. Cause of death: blunt trauma to the head. No sign of forced entry or third-party involvement. That was it. No interviews with neighbors. No examination of her previous medical history. No mention of the bruises that didn't match a fall. They'd closed it before they even opened it. So I did what they didn't. I went back. To the neighborhood. To the people who'd lived next door when I was 16. Most of them had moved. A few didn't answer the door. But Mrs. Carter, 2 houses down. The woman who used to grow sunflowers taller than her fence, she remembered everything. Eli? She gasped when she saw me. Goodness, you've grown. I didn't smile. I'm looking into what happened to my mom. Her expression darkened. She invited me in without another word. Her living room was exactly as I remembered it: knitted blankets, old wood paneling, a faint smell of tea and dust. She sat across from me and held her hands together tightly. I always wondered if someone would come asking, she said. Then she pulled out a small plastic storage box from under the sofa. Inside, cassette tapes, old ones, labeled with dates. I used to record my garden instructions, narrate things for my niece, you know, But sometimes I'd just leave it running while I worked in the yard, she explained. Background sound, birds, music, nothing important. She handed one over. The date, June 14th, the day before my mother died. I remember hearing something strange that day, she said quietly. Yelling, a door slamming. I never told the police. I wasn't sure what it meant. Back at Diane's that night, I borrowed her old tape player and slipped in the cassette. It started slow, just wind, birds, the distant buzz of a lawnmower. Then, around the 18-minute mark, voices, muffled but intense. A man shouting, a woman crying. Then, a loud bang. Not a fall, not wood on wood, something heavier, blunt, final. I paused the tape. My hand was shaking. I listened again, and again. Each time the sound was the same. Cliff didn't find her. He made sure no one else would. I leaned back in the chair, pressed the heels of my palms into my eyes. Everything I'd feared, everything I'd buried. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was evidence. Proof that my mother didn't just fall. She was broken silenced, while the world looked away. The past wasn't dust. It was still breathing. And now I had what I needed to make it speak. It's strange what people think they can get away with when no one's looking. Wounds get erased with paperwork. Stories get buried with signatures. And if you sign the right name at the right time, sometimes the truth just disappears. But not always. Not when someone finally goes back to read the fine print. Daniel called me late one night. I picked up on the second ring. "You near a computer?" he asked. "Check your inbox, now." I opened the email, scanned PDFs, hospital discharge forms from County General. 3 years before my mother died. "Cliff signed her out after a fall in the kitchen," Daniel said. "But look closer." I zoomed in on the signature at the bottom. Eli Mercer, only it wasn't. My mother's handwriting was soft, looping, careful. I'd memorized it from birthday cards and recipe notes on the fridge. This, sharp, slanted, wrong. "Forged?" I asked. "Absolutely," Daniel replied. "Sloppy, too. He got the E right, but after that, it falls apart. I've got her real signature from mortgage forms to compare." I felt my pulse thudding in my ears. He kept going. "The discharge notes say she was alert, stable, and chose to leave early. But the nurse log says she was semi-conscious. Head injury. Confused. No family allowed in at first." I gripped the phone tighter. "He forced her out," I said. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't have to. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Daniel found another report from 2 years later, a broken wrist. Claimed she tripped on a rug, but the break pattern was inconsistent with a fall. Clean fracture. Defensive position. "There's no way she landed like that by accident," Daniel said. "You only get this kind of break when you're blocking a hit." My mother had literally tried to shield herself, and the system had filed it away like it meant nothing. Piece by piece, the image of her final years came into focus. Medical visits with no follow-ups. Prescription refills she never picked up. A police wellness check requested by a neighbor that Cliff intercepted. Every sign was there. Every warning. Ignored. Buried. Signed away. Daniel compiled it all into a report. "This won't get him arrested today," he warned. "But in front of the right judge, it could be enough to reclassify Ellen's case." Get it reopened as a suspicious death. That was all I needed. A door, just wide enough to wedge truth through. As I scrolled through the forged documents again, something hit me. He didn't even bother hiding it well, because he didn't have to. No one questioned a husband. No one questioned Cliff Mercer. Until now. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen, and whispered to myself, she didn't get to speak, but her records will. We weren't just reopening a case. We were unburying a voice, and I was going to make sure it was finally heard. I had read her journal in pieces, slowly, carefully, a page a night, sometimes less. It wasn't just about preserving her words. It was about protecting myself from what I might find between the lines. But that night, after the forged signature, the fake discharge papers, the defensive wounds, I opened it again, and I didn't stop. The page was dated May 6th, a month before she died. There was nothing dramatic about it, no big confession, no screams in ink, just one quiet paragraph in her small, careful handwriting. If one morning I don't wake up, I hope the kids remember that I tried. I tried to stay. I tried to be gentle. I tried to keep peace where there was none. But some storms don't end. Some homes don't let you grow. If I'm gone, know it wasn't by choice. I stopped breathing. The lamp hummed faintly on the desk beside me, but the rest of the world fell silent. She knew. She didn't say when, didn't say how, but she knew. I stared at the words, read them again and again. Each time they hit harder, like a whispered goodbye I hadn't known to listen for. All this time, I thought I was the one chasing justice. But maybe she left a trail on purpose. Maybe this journal wasn't just for her sanity. Maybe it was her quiet attempt at survival on paper, if not in life. I flipped back a few pages. Her tone shifted the closer she got to the end. Earlier entries were filled with hope small ones. Casey laughed today at the kitchen table. Eli fixed the toaster without help. Little wins in a war she never named out loud. But then the entries grew darker. Cliff was quiet all day. That's worse than the yelling. I locked the bathroom door even when I didn't need to, just in case. And then, that final haunting line, if I'm gone, know it wasn't by choice. I couldn't read anymore. I closed the journal gently, as if waking someone who had finally fallen asleep. And I just sat there, not crying, not shaking, just still, frozen in the weight of it all. We live our lives thinking we'll get to say goodbye, that we'll get closure, that people will know how much we fought for them. But sometimes, your truth only survives if someone finds it later. Someone who cares enough to look. That night, I knew this wasn't just my mother's story. It was her will, her evidence, her unfinished statement, and I was the only one left to sign it. I left the journal closed on the desk, didn't touch it again for days, but the last line echoed in my head like a vow. If I'm gone, know it wasn't by choice. And now, the choice was mine. To stay silent, or make her story louder than ever. I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't the boy shaking in a rain-soaked hoodie, thrown out of his own home with nothing but a backpack and a name no one respected. I was Eli Mercer, attorney at law, and I had everything my mother never did. Law, truth, memory, and now evidence. I sat at my desk, lit only by the desk lamp and the gray flicker of dawn pressing through the window. The city was still asleep, but my mind was wide awake. In front of me, a growing pile of documents. Hospital reports, forged discharge forms, witness statements, audio from a neighbor's garden cassette, my mother's journal, cataloged and time-stamped. Next to it, a legal brief in progress. Motion to reopen investigation into suspicious death of Eli Mercer. Every sentence I typed felt like a brick in a foundation she never got. I didn't rush, didn't let anger guide my pen. Everything had to be perfect. No holes, no emotion clouding the structure. Just fact after fact, lined up like soldiers. And as I worked, I noticed something strange. I wasn't afraid. I didn't flinch when I typed my father's name. Didn't hesitate when I described the bruises, the patterns of control, the moments the system failed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to him. I was confronting him, on my terms, with something stronger than fists or fear, with the law. The version of me Cliff remembered, the one who shook when he raised his voice, who backed down when ordered out of his home, that version was gone. This me? I knew how to build a case. I knew how to take apart a lie. I knew how to make the truth stick in a judge's mind, so that even Cliff Mercer couldn't smile his way out of it. At 5:46 a.m., I paused, read through the motion one last time, noted every supporting exhibit, journal entries, photographic comparisons of handwriting, expert affidavit from Daniel Reyes on injury patterns, supplemental audio transcript from Mrs. Carter's tape. It was tight, strong, enough to force a court's hand. I saved the file, then printed a clean copy. As the printer hummed, I looked at the wall above my desk. A single photo hung there. Mom in the backyard, apron dusted with flour, sunlight on her face, laughing at something off camera. I stared at it for a long time. Then I said, out loud, "I'm not going to let them forget you." By 6:15, I was dressed, papers clipped, case folder sealed. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't second-guessing. I was ready. And when I stepped outside into the cool morning air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not peace, not yet, but power. The quiet kind. The kind you don't have to shout to make real. The courthouse smelled the same. Polished wood, coffee, cold dust clinging to the corners of justice. But that morning, it felt different. Because this time, I wasn't sitting in the back, waiting for someone else to speak. I was the one holding the folder. I was the one whose name was on the motion, and I was the one he didn't expect to see again. When Cliff Mercer walked into the room, he didn't look shaken. He looked smug, pressed suit, blue tie, hair perfectly in place, not a gray strand out of order. He looked like a man on his way to win something, like he always had. Then he saw me, and for the first time in over 6 years, our eyes met. He stopped just a second, tilted his head, and smiled. Not the smile of a father, not even of a man, but the smile of a wolf that sees the sheep have wandered back into the field. "Eli," he said, with a slight nod, like we were just two old colleagues bumping into each other at a reunion. I said nothing, just looked at him, not down, not away, right into him. He waited a beat, then leaned in slightly. You really going through with this? Still, I didn't speak. That's when the smirk came. That small, trademark twitch at the corner of his mouth. The same one I saw when he told me to pack my things. The same one when he said my mother should have watched her step. I thought I raised you tougher than this, he whispered. I took a deep breath. Then I spoke. Calm, measured, low. I'm not here to remember, Cliff. He blinked. I'm here to prove. We sat on opposite sides of the room. The judge came in. Gavel dropped. Court in session. The motion was simple: to reopen the case of Ellen Mercer's death, based on newly uncovered evidence, suggesting it was not an accident. Cliff's lawyer, a man named Blake Harris, stood up, all charm and condescension. Your Honor, with respect, this is an emotionally charged attempt to rewrite history. There's no new forensic evidence, no confession, only interpretations from biased individuals with personal grievances. He glanced at me, then smiled at Cliff. I didn't flinch. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, walked to the center of the room, looked straight ahead. Your Honor, this is not an emotional appeal. This is a legal request supported by new documentation, witness testimony, and expert analysis. It includes, but is not limited to, a forged medical release, patterns of physical abuse disguised as accidents, and an audio recording from a neighbor dated the night before Mrs. Mercer's death. I handed the clerk the folder. This is not about resentment, I said. It's about fact. Cliff didn't speak, not directly, but he didn't need to. He shifted in his seat, tapping his thumb against his knee. That was his tell. He was starting to realize this wasn't just a son with a grudge. This was a case, and he was in it. The judge reviewed the motion, asked questions, requested more documentation to be submitted within 2 weeks. Then he looked around the room and said something that made my heart punch through my chest. Based on preliminary review, the court is inclined to authorize reopening the investigation into the death of Ellen Mercer. Official ruling will follow pending review of full exhibits. It wasn't over, but it was open. The door he had sealed 6 years ago cracked, and I was going to break it wide. As we exited the courtroom, Cliff brushed past me. You really think you can undo everything? He hissed. I turned to him, face still calm. I don't need to undo it. I leaned in. I just need to show it. The courtroom was quiet when Beth took the stand. Not tense, not hostile, just still, like everyone could feel this wasn't just testimony. It was release. She sat with both hands folded tightly in her lap, wearing a plain navy blouse. No jewelry, no makeup. The Beth I remembered was always put together, curated performing. This version wasn't performing anything. She was just surviving. I didn't look at her like a victim or an enemy. I looked at her like someone who finally chose truth over silence. The attorney walked her through the basics: name, age, relationship to Cliff Mercer. Then it came. Can you describe the nature of your relationship with the defendant? She hesitated. Her voice cracked the first time. He was in control. All the time, not just of what I wore or where I went. He controlled how I thought, what I said, how I smiled. Her eyes flicked toward Cliff just for a second. Then she looked down. The day I married him, I thought I was safe. I thought I'd won something. But within weeks, I realized I wasn't a wife. I was a witness, trapped in a life I couldn't escape. She talked about the first slap, the long silences, the rules that changed without warning, the nights locked in the guest room, the threats whispered so casually she almost didn't believe them at first. And then, she talked about my mother. I knew Ellen was hurting. I knew it before she died. And I didn't help her. I thought if I stayed quiet, he'd spare me. But I was wrong. Her voice broke again. I didn't think I'd survive him either. There was a long pause. The judge didn't rush her. No one did. When Beth finally looked up, there were tears on her cheeks, but her hands were steady, and her words clear. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just want this court to know what he really is. Not the man who shakes hands at church, not the man who pays his taxes early, the man who breaks people slowly until they stop recognizing themselves. She stepped down after that, didn't look at me, didn't need to, because in that moment, I saw the truth. She had paid for her silence, and now she was finally free. That night, back at my apartment, I opened my inbox and saw an email I wasn't expecting. From Eli Mercer, subject, just one thing. I clicked it before my brain could catch up. The message was short, just a few lines. Hi, Eli. Tommy told me what you're doing. I don't know what to say, except I never stopped hoping you'd come back. I didn't understand back then why you left, but I do now, and I want you to know. I remember everything. The nights you rid to me when Dad was yelling in the other room. The way you packed my lunch when Mom forgot. The time you promised you'd come back. You did. I'm proud of you. I miss you. Besito. I sat there staring at the screen, mouth slightly open, unable to blink. She remembered. She remembered everything I thought the world had erased. And she didn't hate me for leaving. She understood why I had to go, why I had to become this version of myself to fight for any of us. I read her message again, then again, until the words weren't just words. They were air, breath, fuel. I clicked reply. But I didn't type anything yet. I just stared at the blinking cursor and whispered to the quiet room. I came back for all of us. The courtroom was packed, but no one spoke. Not the reporters in the back. Not the woman 2 rows behind me clutching a tissue. Not even Cliff. Especially not Cliff. He sat motionless, hands folded, jaw tight. Eyes straight ahead, like he still believed he could will the world into obeying him one more time. But it was too late for that. Too many things had been said. Too many facts couldn't be bent. And for once in his life, no one came to his defense. The judge's voice cut through the silence, firm and even. This court finds sufficient grounds to formally reopen the case surrounding the death of Ellen Mercer. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Furthermore, due to the overwhelming evidence of sustained abuse, medical forgery, and manipulation of legal documents, Cliff Mercer is to be charged with obstruction, falsification, and will remain in custody pending further criminal investigation into Ellen Mercer's death. Cliff's lawyer leaned in to whisper something to him, but Cliff didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't smirk. The mask had finally cracked. I turned and looked. The courtroom wasn't on his side anymore. There were no supporters, no loyal friends. Beth sat in the far corner, eyes closed, Shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. Even she hadn't come to watch him fall. She'd come to watch herself rise. When the gavel came down, the sound didn't echo. It settled, like dirt over a grave. I gathered my files. My hands didn't shake. Outside, it was raining. Of course it was. 6 years ago, it rained when I was thrown out of that house with nothing but a bag and a bruise. Today, it rained again. But this time, I walked into it. No umbrella. No rush. Just walked. The drops hit my shoulders, my head, soaked through my shirt and coat. But I didn't flinch, because this time, the rain wasn't a punishment. It was a cleansing, a quiet, steady washing away of everything he tried to make me carry. I reached the courthouse steps and paused, closed my eyes, tilted my head back. Let it fall. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because this moment wasn't about grief. It was about truth. And truth doesn't need tears to be real. I remembered her words. If one day I don't wake up, know it wasn't by choice. She hadn't been forgotten. She hadn't been erased. She had been heard. As I walked into the rain, soaked and silent, I whispered something I hadn't said since I was 16. Mom, we did it. It took me 6 years to return, and another 6 weeks after the verdict to ask for a visit. I didn't owe him anything, but something in me still needed to hear it. One question, one answer. No lawyers, no guards, no drama. Just a conversation between the man who destroyed our family and the son who survived it. The prison felt colder than I expected. Not physically, just cold. A place where sound didn't echo and time didn't matter. A place where people stopped pretending. They led me down a hallway, past steel doors and tired faces. Finally, the officer nodded toward a small room with a glass wall and 2 plastic chairs. He was already sitting there. Cliff Mercer. Gray now. Paler. Thinner. Not weak, just less. Like time had taken the parts of him that once filled a room with fear. He looked up as I entered. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just watched. I sat down across from him. Between us, the glass. He lifted the phone slowly. I did the same. There were no pleasantries. I leaned forward and asked the only question I came for. Why? His face didn't change. Not at first. He stared at me for a long time as if trying to decide what version of himself he wanted to be. Then he sighed and said something I wasn't ready for. I don't have a reason. I blinked. He kept going. I wasn't angry. Not really. I wasn't trying to hurt her because she deserved it. I didn't think she did. I was weak. That word hung in the air like a fog. Weak. Not a word I ever imagined Cliff Mercer using. He used to walk like nothing could touch him, speak like every room belonged to him, raise his hand like it was gospel. But now, he just looked tired. He leaned closer. You think you inherit your strength from your father, Eli. But I hope to God you didn't inherit anything from me. I didn't respond, because deep down I knew I hadn't. I had nothing of his in me. Not his violence, not his silence, not the emptiness he mistook for power. He looked away for a moment, then whispered, "Your mother was better than me every day of her life, and I hated how much I needed her." That was the closest he would ever come to an apology. I lowered the phone slowly. He noticed, and before I left, he said one last thing. "You were never the weak one, Eli." I stood, nodded once, and walked out. No parting words, no backward glance, just the sound of the door unlocking, and the weight of everything I no longer carried. Outside, the sky was overcast, but it didn't rain. For once, it didn't rain. I looked up at the clouds and thought of her, of the kitchen light still on at midnight, of the smell of her shampoo, of the way she used to hum to herself while folding towels. And then I thought of Casey, of Beth, of myself, all still standing, all still here. We didn't win in the way movies pretend we will, but justice isn't about winning. It's about truth. And now, finally, we had it. I'd never imagined becoming someone's legal guardian. But when Casey turned 18 and asked if she could come live with me, I didn't hesitate. Not because I felt like a parent, but because I knew what it felt like to have no one, and I wasn't going to let her feel that again. Chapter. The paperwork was simple, not because the law made it easy, but because there was no one left to contest it. Cliff was behind bars. Beth had moved out of state, starting over in a quiet town where no one knew her last name. And Casey chose me. When the court approved the guardianship, I expected relief. What I didn't expect was how heavy the joy felt, like I was carrying something fragile, but also, finally, whole. The day she moved in, the sky was clear. Not a drop of rain, not even a cloud. She stepped out of the car with 2 suitcases and 1 wooden box clutched tight to her chest. I recognized the box instantly. Mom's. She didn't say much at first, just looked around the apartment like she was memorizing it, not just seeing it. "I can take your bags," I offered. She shook her head, held onto the box like it might fall apart if she let go. We walked inside. No grand speech, no tearful reunion. Just 2 siblings, 2 survivors, trying to make something that resembled a home. Later that night, I found her standing by the bookshelf in the living room. She was holding the box. Mom's name carved faintly on top. Nothing fancy. Just Ellen in small, steady letters, like the ones in her journals. "What's in it?" I asked softly. Casey didn't turn around. Recipes. A lock of her hair. Letters she wrote, but never sent. That blue ribbon she always wore when she cooked. And a dried sunflower. I swallowed. "She grew them with me in the backyard," she added, "the summer before she died." Then she turned to me. Her eyes didn't look like a teenager's. They looked like mine had once, older than her age, full of things she shouldn't have had to carry. "I want to put this here," she said, placing the box on the middle shelf, right between 2 books. To Kill a Mockingbird and the collected poems of Mary Oliver. It looked right there, like it had always belonged. "This way," she said, brushing dust off the top. "We keep her like this, not just in memory, but in the room, in the light." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I nodded, and she sat down next to me on the couch. "چطور شد؟" We didn't talk much that night, but we didn't need to, because silence, for us, wasn't empty. It was familiar. And now, for the first time, it wasn't scary. It was safe. I watched Casey flip through one of Mom's journals later, legs curled up under her, reading in the same way Mom used to read at night softly, mouth moving without sound. And I realized something. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were remembering, rebuilding, rooting. Not from where things broke, but from where we decided they would begin again. Two kids who grew up in silence, now learning how to speak, how to stay, how to love without fear. And as I looked at her, tracing Mom's name with her fingertip on the box, I whispered in my head, we kept her, and somehow, we kept each other too. It's funny how the same places can hold completely different weight, depending on who you are and who you've become. I passed the courthouse again one morning, not to file, not to fight, just passing by on my way to the office. And that's when I saw her. A woman, maybe early 30s, holding her child tight to her chest. Her eyes scanned the building like it was a mountain she didn't know how to climb. She stood there for a long time, one foot on the steps, one still on the sidewalk, frozen in that in-between place, the one between fear and the decision to finally do something about it. I knew that place. I had lived in that place. She didn't see me, didn't know who I was, didn't need to. But I watched her take a deep breath, adjust her grip on the child, and step forward, up the stairs, into the unknown, toward something she hoped would save her. I kept walking, but something in me shifted as I did, because in that moment I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. I can't fix everything. I can't rewrite what happened. I can't bring my mother back. But if I can do this, if I can fight hard enough that someone else makes it out, if even just one person feels less alone, then she didn't leave this world for nothing. People talk about justice like it's a finish line, like there's a verdict, and then the story ends. But it doesn't. Justice isn't an end, it's a doorway, and you still have to choose what kind of life you walk into after. I chose mine, not in a dramatic moment, not in a courtroom, not even in front of Cliff. I chose it in the small things. In cooking breakfast for Casey, in offering pro bono work for abuse victims, in listening without judgment, in remembering without bitterness. My mother didn't live to see who I became, but I live every day to honor who she was. Kind, quietly brave, full of grace in the face of a storm no one else seemed to notice. They tried to bury her with silence, but she left echoes in every journal page, every sunflower in the yard, every time I choose empathy over anger, clarity over rage. She's still here, not just in memory, but in action. That morning, I paused for one last look at the courthouse behind me. Then I looked ahead, not back, because I'm not stuck in that house anymore, not in that rain, not in that silence. I walked on, not because I was running from something, but because, for the first time, I was finally walking toward something. If I could help one person, then my mother's story didn't end in vain. It simply passed through me and began again.